Welcome to the Day in History for May 12th. Here we go. Now, today's day in history is the day that King John is served an ultimatum, which means like do this or else, by English barons, which eventually will lead to the creation of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is one of the most famous documents in English history. Now, the big idea for today is that the rule of law will bind us all together. And this kind of comes up especially with the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the fact that we are equal and that we must all follow the law. I have to follow the law. You have to follow the law. The president has to follow the law because the law applies to humans and it doesn't matter who you are. So here we go. I'll let you write this down. And off we go. We are in Runnymede in England once again. Now we're in the year 1215. We're way back. So this is one of the older days in history we've had. And the battle in 1066 that we talked about, the Battle of Hastings, this day in history is directly a product of that battle because it brought in the new monarchy to England. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, let's talk about King John. King John, oh boy, he is, many would consider him to be a very typical villain-like character. If you think of a bad king, this is King John. People call him the worst king ever. If he could have a coffee cup, it would say worst king ever. And let me tell you why. Well, first of all, he imprisoned his own wife in the dungeon. His prisoners, he starved them to death. Yeah, bad king. It's been said that he murdered his own nephew. Now, it takes a lot to murder your own family. Apparently, King John did. There's a story that he pulled on the beards of the Irish chiefs. I highly doubt that they thought that that was a sign of respect. And this is probably what made people the most mad, was that he charged huge taxes to fight wars. And he did not do very well in his wars either. But he tried to pull in so much money that it really made the rich nobility mad. And if they didn't pay, he would take their land. And so eventually, the barons or the nobles, they decided to rebel against him, and they surrounded his castle and pretty much said, no, we're done. You're a bad king. You need to listen to us. And so this eventually led to the Magna Carta. And here's what happened. Now, they sit him down and they say, King John, you're a bad king. And I'm paraphrasing, by the way. Hey, that was the word of the day. You're a really bad king, and you need to follow the laws. And so they came up with a large list of important things that they wanted him to sign, and some of which had to do with laws. Now, the law, like I said, was very important, but it only applied to free men or free people. The vast majority of England were peasants that were actually owned by the nobles, okay? So when we think about medieval times and there's all these people there, the vast majority are not free. They're like property. It's sad to say, but they were treated like animals that were owned. It's pretty sad. Now, so what we have then is the Magna Carta itself. It's a very large document, and many say it's one of the most important documents, like I said, in English history. But most of it dealt with customs and culture and trade. It didn't all focus on the law. And so the part that I want to bring your attention to is this right here. Okay, there's this section in the Magna Carta that speaks directly to the law. And this is so important because we live in a society where we are used to having a pretty good law system. I know it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than King John. I mean, King John could just go take people and stick them in a dungeon, and he didn't have to tell anybody. He could just say, I didn't like them or something, right? That would not work nowadays. Now, I rarely put up a lot of text, but today I'm going to, because I want to read some of the important parts of this law section. The most important, the king is subject to the law and he can be punished. This is really important, okay? Could you imagine having a leader that was not held accountable for their actions? Could you imagine a president that didn't have to follow the law? Well, King John didn't have to follow the law, and they said, yes, you do, and they made him sign it. Everyone is subject to the law. So not only the king, but everybody else. No free man could be punished except through the law of the land and a judgment of his peers. This is a jury, guys. This is like, you did something wrong. Okay, well, we're going to have a trial and make sure that someone didn't just make something up. Okay, pretty important. All judges, constables, sheriffs, and bailiffs, they actually have to know the law. Could you imagine having a judge that had no idea what the law was, but was still a judge? It doesn't make sense, right? So they made sure that was in there. Justice cannot be sold, denied, or delayed. This is really important. You can't say, well, give me $50 and I'll let you off. Okay, it's bribery. You cannot deny justice, and you cannot say, well, you're guilty, but I'll punish you in 20 years. No, not how it works. Okay, and taxes can only be collected with the consent of the people that are being governed. Guys, this is taxation without representation. We're going to talk more about this in a minute, but the Magna Carta had an effect on all these other documents later in our history. Now, King John didn't follow the things he signed, and a civil war broke out. King John ended up dying, I think, in 1217. He actually died from dysentery. Dysentery is a bad disease where you pretty much poop yourself to death. So I guess he kind of got what he deserved by being one of the worst kings ever. But eventually, well, I mean, the rest is history. In this short video, we're not going to get into the length of English history, but the document itself came about because a ruler took too much power and was not a good ruler. Now, the Civil War lasted for a while. Some people didn't like the Magna Carta, and the French got involved, and pretty complicated, okay? It's kind of like remember the War of the Roses, how I tried to explain how all the different kings and queens lined up, and the sons and the heir to the throne, and yeah, this is pretty much before that. Now, what's important, though, is that the Magna Carta has acted as a, I want to say a study guide, but that's not a very good way to describe it. It has acted as kind of like a blueprint for basic human rights. Okay, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they all can kind of be compared to the Magna Carta, and the fact that people want to be treated equally. People want the law to be fair. People don't want someone to have power and not to be held accountable. People want things to be equal. Because when things are equal, then we each feel like we can get what we need, and that someone is not taking too much. I wish that that was 100% the case in our world, but it's not. But it's sure a lot better than King John. So, day in history, Magna Carta. This would be an excellent thing to do follow-up on. There's some really cool YouTube videos about it. And it's a really old document. So, guys, thank you. See you tomorrow.